It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast, because I would never, ever do that to the loyal listeners. A lot of you have been with us, 10 years now, which is just incredible. Thank all of you so much. Please tell your friends and family. In fact, your friends and family probably already know that you listen to me and listen to us. So maybe tell people that aren't friends or family. Maybe tell your colleagues. I don't know. Can't wait to get some wisdom today from my former coach in the NFL with both the Cowboys, who gave me my first start, as well as the Buffalo Bills. He's currently at Nebraska. His name is Frank Verducci. We'll get to Frank momentarily. I should mention, I don't know if I already said we're presented by DraftKings, but I need to. In fact, I'm contractually obligated to. Every episode is presented by DraftKings. Love those dudes, just like I love each and every one of you that somehow, some way contributes to what we're trying to build here in your own little fashion. Some of you spread the word via social media. You like, or you retweet, or you share on Facebook, or you do something on TikTok. Maybe that's just a like too. Whatever it is, at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. The 5-star reviews mean a great deal. Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Whatever it is that you do, it is greatly appreciated. Same with the sponsor confirmation email winners. Not a lot of sponsors this week, but you can always go to rosstucker.com and see all of them and take advantage of the specific code designed for you. Then we've got the YouTube shout out winners. I love this. I love doing the videos for you guys that want a YouTube video. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Please subscribe. Even if you're not a big YouTube person, or if you know someone that is, tell them to subscribe. And then if you make any comment, I see it, and you get a cameo style shout out from me, which is pretty awesome. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
As promised, now joined by my favorite coach I had in the NFL. And I had 9 offensive line coaches, by the way, which is almost mathematically impossible if you play 7 years. The Senior Offensive Analyst at the University of Nebraska, the Cornhuskers, my good friend now that I'm 42, 20 years after I met him, Frank Verducci. Frank, Coach, thanks so much for coming on.
Great to see you, Ross. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so much I want to get into with you, but it's funny because it was, I guess almost 21 years ago now that I first met you, and I don't want to give anything away. So I want to know what you remember of the first time we met each other.
Well, I remember we were on the campus at Princeton, and I had a very good relationship with your agent, Joe Linta, and went down to work out you and a couple other players on the Princeton team. And a couple of them were more heralded, but once the workout started, it became evident to me that you were wired differently than most of the young men I worked out for the draft. And we would go through a drill, and then as soon as it was over, you would, first of all, before it ever started, you wanted all the details, which was impressive. But then when it was over, you always wanted to do it again. Hey, I can do it better. Let me try it again. And that attitude stuck with me, besides the fact that you performed very well.
So that's really interesting, because you've never told me that before. I thought, Frank, for all I knew, you were coming to work out Dennis Norman, who was 3-time All-Ivy League, a physical phenom, ended up playing 9 years in the NFL, was a combine guy, got drafted, all that stuff, got drafted by the Seahawks. I envisioned that you were really there to work him out, and that John Ravichet, my roommate and teammate, and me were kind of there as well. I didn't know, I don't think, ahead of time that you knew that much about me.
Well, again, credit to Joe, your agent, asked me if I was headed out to Princeton, and he asked me to be sure to give you a thorough evaluation. So I knew who you were when I came in, and like I said, that was really one of the most enjoyable workouts I had because all three of you, really put forth an incredible effort. But it was interesting. John and yourself really made the lasting impression. I mean, you were all athletic, big, strong guys, but both of you you could see that competitive spirit with both you and John.
Well, I remember whatever drills we were doing, I was beating the crap out of Dennis, and he was starting to get mad. And I'm thinking, dude, you're getting drafted. like we can be friends later. He was looking at me like, but he knew the way I was. I mean, he knew that's how I rolled. Do you remember anything about my attire at the workout?
Oh God, can you imagine how many people I've worked out in 10 years in the NFL? I don't. I mean, I have to admit, I remember your workout. I remember the facility, all that, but I can't tell you that I have that kind of recall.
This is going to be fun. Do you remember that it was videoed? That I had someone video the workout?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So Joe told me, because I only got 2 workouts, Mike Tice and you were the only 2 guys and Mike Tice at the time was the O-line coach for the Vikings, but Mike Tice and you were the only 2 offensive line coaches that came to Princeton to work us out. And Joe told me, video the workout with Frank, and we can send that to teams. So this is Frank, you're gonna love this, okay? So first of all, I went shirtless for the workout with you. I went shirtless, and in part because I wanted to look better for the scouts, but also because I was videoing it. I'm 310, 315. I went fake tanning a couple times.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank goodness you kept that to yourself.
So I had a little bit of a red tint. I just thought, dude, I was pulling out all the stops, man. I wanted to look better. I wanted to look better than my shirt off. So here's why that's funny. So that's number 1. Number 2, the guy that videoed it was a guy that you are probably very familiar with now, because he's on NFL Network every morning, Kyle Brandt.
No kidding. Wow.
Kyle Brandt is the guy that videoed that workout. And by the way, I returned the favor videoing his audition tape for the real world, and we both made it. I made the NFL. He made the real world. So we were roommates, and I said, Kyle, because I knew he had a background in theater and drama and whatever. I was like, can you film this workout? He was like, yeah. So he came down to Jadwin Gym, and he filmed the workout. I sent that to the teams that Joe Linta, my agent, told me to send it to, Frank.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I ended up getting signed. Well, 2 things. One is I ended up getting signed by Washington. Right. Joe Pendry was the offensive line coach. The late, great Tony Sperano, who also had a relationship with Joe Linta, was the tight end coach and assistant offensive line coach. And at one point, Tony said to me at the end of the draft, when they were figuring out who to sign as undrafted free agents, they remembered that the Ivy League guy sent them the video with his shirt off. And they're like, get him. Get the Ivy League guy that sent the video with no shirt on.
You never know what's going to tip the scale. Credit to you for pulling out all the stops.
So funny. And so I remember that distinctly. The other thing I remember, Frank, is I got 2 calls the entire NFL draft. 2 calls the whole draft. And I sat there. I had just gotten my first cell phone a month earlier. I had my dorm phone. I had it all lined up. I got called by you. And at some point, I got called by John Garrett, who was also on the Bengals staff at that point. I can't remember which one was which. One of you called me like in the first round. The other one called me in the second day. But you both said that there was some interest in potentially signing me after the draft if I wasn't drafted. But I distinctly remember I only ever got 2 calls. They're both from the Bengals. And Frank, back then, the Bengals were like the team you absolutely did not want to go to.
Siberia.
They had been terrible for
Yeah.
10 years in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine that I called you the second day, because usually you start to prioritize the undrafted free agents on the second day. John, it might have been a Princeton thing with you and him calling you on the first day. But that's the most likely scenario.
Okay, so by the way, to my knowledge, I don't know if you guys ever did try to get me after the draft. I don't know if that actually ended up happening.
No, we didn't. As I recall, we had some other guys that we prioritized that Paul liked a little bit more, and went in that direction. And as I recall, we had drafted a guard.
That's right. I believe it was Victor Leyva in the 4th round.
Victor Leyva from Arizona State. That's right.
How about that? How about my brain there? All right. So, what people don't know, though, is the next year, Frank became the offensive line coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Midway through the year, Washington soured on me. They signed Trey Johnson, terrible fit for Spurrier's offense, but they re-signed Trey Johnson. They cut me to try to put me down in the practice squad. And I knew some teams were going to try to get me on practice squad, like Marty Schottenheimer with the San Diego Chargers. But it just so happened, Frank, that you were the offensive line coach in Dallas, and you guys had suffered an inordinate amount of injuries. And probably, unless it was those two things, unless it was you, Frank, and the amount of injuries, I probably don't get picked up on waivers by the Cowboys. What do you remember about that?
Well, I would correct you. You were going to be picked up by the Dallas Cowboys. I remember being very excited when I saw you go on the waiver wire. Part of a thing in the NFL, and you know this, but your listeners might not be aware of it, is when coaches travel from team to team, they like to have somebody that they're familiar with and that they feel like will have their back. Basically, you call them their guys. And after I had worked you out and I saw you'd been good enough to make the Redskins, which didn't surprise me, as you said, we were going through a transition in Dallas, and we set an NFL record that year. We had 15 different offensive line starters that year, including yourself, obviously. And I think 9 of those started their first NFL game over the course of that season. It was just a fluky year. But I remember being excited when you got waived. I went right to Mr. Jones and said, this is a guy we really need to have. And the thing I remember more than anything else is I was shocked the next day when we were the only team that claimed you for the active roster. And I thought it would be a battle to see, if somebody below us claimed you, we'd obviously lose you. But I remember just being very surprised that we were the only team to claim you, but also very excited to have you coming into Dallas.
Well, so I got there, and obviously you suffered another injury. The offensive line did. I ended up starting the last 7 games that year. I'll never forget any of it. I mean, my first start at Indianapolis against the Colts, and I think you might have written me a letter or something, or just said, I'm thrilled for you. It's an awesome opportunity tomorrow. You knew how big a deal that was to be starting a game in the NFL. By the way, the RCA Dome, that's a rough place to start your first NFL regular season game. I mean, it was loud or whatever. But then after that, Jacksonville, we won. I played well. Washington, Thanksgiving, we won. I played well. We were getting the run game going. And then obviously Frank ended up coaching me in Buffalo as well in 2004, which was another really good year for me. Actually, those are probably my 2 best years, 02 and 04. How would you describe me, Frank? Most of the people that are listening or watching on YouTube, they've been listening to me for like 10 plus years. How would you describe me as a player from a coaching perspective?
Okay. Well, first, I want to say that that's something, the letter to you is something that I've done my whole career. If you had it, still had it, it would probably be on the back of a test or a tip sheet that I handed out the night before the game. Then you'd hand your test in, and then for every offensive lineman, I would always write them a note and put it in their locker, the test corrected, and put the note in their locker prior to the game. And I just always, that was my show of appreciation, and it was me just giving the personal touch that it was more than just business. So,
And it means more than you know.
Yeah,
I mean, it means a great deal.
I have players that I coached 30 years ago, and they still mention that. So I'm very proud of that. But you know, the NFL is obviously, like any pro sport, a talent-driven league, and sometimes that talent is the pursuit of talent becomes a little bit intoxicating. Now, I mean this as a sincere compliment. You are not the most talented guy. You are a guy that the label I would put on you is you're an achiever. You're an achiever in everything you've ever taken on, whether it was overcoming the odds to get to the Ivy League and play college football and get a degree from Princeton, whether it was turning over every stone, as you just described, in maximizing your workout to create an opportunity to get into the NFL, whatever it is, you were going to think it through, carve a path to follow, and then you were going to persevere and endure whatever it took to reach your goal. And now it's the same thing in your media career. I mean, you've started from, I mean, you're not a big name former pro celebrity who all the doors get open to at the end of your playing career, but look at what you've achieved. And I'm the least surprised guy in the world. You are an achiever, and you're a very bright guy, and top of the list is you loved football. You would play football all day. You'd be the player association's worst enemy, because you'd say, hey, why are there any hourly rules? I want to be in the facility all day long. I want to practice all day long. I still tell and give people, you had a sheet of every possible pass set you could take in every protection against every possible alignment. And you had it memorized. At first, you had it on a piece of paper, but you had it memorized. 152 protection, 3 technique, 2 technique, inside shade. And you just drilled that footwork that you made yourself good enough to be a starting lineman in the NFL. Now, were there more talented guys? Yes. But the percentage of talented guys who underachieved versus guys like you that overachieved, you know, my dollar was on a guy like you all the time. If I was putting my paycheck and my mortgage on the line, I wanted you lining up, because I knew you were going to, first of all, we're never going to bust an assignment. Secondly, you're going to compete until the game ended. And thirdly, you were going to find a way to get it done. I mean, I still remember Bryant Young wanting to kill you because you were one of the all-time best cut blockers during my career. And you were a pain in the ass. You got under people's skin, which bottom line is you're trying to achieve that edge to move the ball and obviously score points and win football games. So you have a special place in my memories just because of how important it was to you and your work ethic.
You know, it's so cool, Frank, because I don't think I'd even be doing this show if it wasn't for you. Like
I doubt that. You would have found
me no, I don't know what I would have gotten into. You gave me an opportunity and to be on an active roster, stay on an active roster, and then start some games, which enabled me to, when Parcells cut me, go to Buffalo. If I don't start those games in Dallas, I don't think I get picked up on waivers by Buffalo, which got me a few more years in the contract extension and, you know, the chance to play there. And obviously you were my coach then again in 2004 in Buffalo, and you saw how that season went. I think we were 9-4 in the 13 games I started. So very cool that you can be, and I can honestly say that you changed my life for the better. I guess that brings up my next question, Frank. Compare NFL to college. From an offensive line coaching perspective, our listeners, I don't know if I've ever had anybody on the show before that I've asked them that. What would you say the biggest differences are between the NFL and college from your perspective? And is there one that you prefer?
Well, the simplest way to put it, the easiest way for the listeners to understand is that it's details versus development. In the NFL, it's all in the details. The college players, their eyes get big when I tell them there are no blown assignments in the NFL. I mean, if you have a blown assignment in a game, it is a big deal. In college football, I mean, you're going to have 7, 8 blown assignments over the course of a game, spread across those 5 starters. The NFL, even though there is a developmental squad, practice squad, it's not about development. I mean, you have to have a certain minimum level of skill set in order to be on an active roster, even to be on a practice squad. And there isn't much time for development. The coaches are obviously engulfed in a game plan and getting the starters ready, and practice reflects that. You think back to how few snaps the backups get, and usually they're running somebody else's offense. So there's really not that developmental aspect. I really think that in the past 5 years in the NFL, the lack of contact has hurt the development of offensive linemen in particular. The lack of a league funneling players into a developmental league has hurt the overall skill set of the league, in my opinion. And that would be the biggest difference. I enjoy both because in the NFL, I had guys like you and some of your other teammates who I could relate to man, and maybe mentor a little bit, especially the younger guys. But I probably learned as much as I taught from people like you. In college, I think you have more of an impact because you have these 18, 19-year-old men who most of them were away from home for the first time. And you recall your acclimation when you left Pennsylvania and went down to Princeton, and the adjustments that you had to make. And I think sometimes that's very underappreciated. We look at the player and we say, this kid's a 4-star. He's going to come in and contribute right away. And we never really take into account the acclimation of going from high school to college or college to pros, because you saw in your own career, you saw guys who were plenty talented, but they just couldn't acclimate to the grind and the competitive level of the NFL. They just didn't have the wiring to succeed. So I enjoy both for their different aspects. It's still, I mean, bottom line, it's all football and it's all people and relating to people. So it's a little long-winded, but that would be my take on it.
Yeah, I guess my last comment would just be, I feel like it'd be really hard and frustrating to go from the NFL where there are no mental mistakes, or if you do, you're just cut, they're not accepted, to college where they're more accepted. I feel like that'd be difficult. I feel like I would, if I was, I'm putting myself in your shoes now as a coach. I'm in the NFL for a while. I go to college. I would have a tough time accepting those 7, 8 mental errors. Not that you did, but that would just really, really bother me.
Well, I had started as a college coach. So again, it was an eye opener when I went to Cincinnati, and, Paul Alexander's telling me there are no mental errors. And you don't see many people who are NFL line coaches, their whole career go back to college. So you really don't see that all that often. It's more common path to go from college to the NFL and back than it is to be strictly NFL and then go down to college. I agree with your point. I believe it would be pretty frustrating.
This was everything I hoped it would be. I love it. You told me some things I didn't even know about my own life and career, and I did the same with you with the workout. Again, Frank Verducci, my favorite coach in the NFL, coached me in Dallas and in Buffalo. Again, Senior Offensive Analyst for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Ross.
So cool to talk to someone like that has had such a profound and big impact on my life. And you think about it, it's the people that you keep in touch with after things like that, after college, after you're with an NFL team. Those are the people that really matter, right? Those are the relationships that have stood the test of time. And that's exactly what I think about when I think about Frank Verducci. Glad we had the time to be able to get him on the show. Such an awesome man, great coach. And really, I think anybody that ever played for him feels that way, which is cool. I mean, that's like the cool part, I think, about being a coach is the fact that he and I are still friends. He's still a mentor of mine. He's still a coach in different aspects of life. And, he's still someone that I look up to, and I appreciate the opportunities he gave me. And I obviously he appreciates that I gave everything I had for him, which is awesome. Appreciate those of you that give everything you have for us, like patreon.com/RT Media, including the I Think We're Done Here members. I get a shout out for their biz at the end of every show. Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com, SteakhouseSports.com, Go-Bengals.com, and Evergreen Economics. Make sure you check out today's Fantasy Feast podcast. I am doing my offensive line rankings. So, yes, we do it on the fantasy show, but I know those of you that love football, which is all of you, would absolutely love to hear my forget fantasy, to hear my NFL O-line rankings, part 1 on today's Fantasy Feast podcast. Tomorrow is an annual episode with Chris Nowinski from the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Once a year, I have him on to get the latest and greatest with what's going on with CT and what we know about brain issues for people that play a lot of football. It's relevant to me. It's relevant to all the guys you watch on TV. I think we're done here.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.